Well, hello everyone. Happy Friday from the team at Certified Forgotten and happy Uncertified Day. That means that today on the podcast feed, we're talking about a new release. You've got Matt Donato and myself. We're not doing a full hour episode, we're just doing a 30-minute episode. We're talking through something that is in theaters, is soon to be on direct to video that you can watch right now. And you can get our scalding hot takes on a movie that, spoiler alert, I don't think Donato and I entirely agree on. But if you're tuning in for the first time, thank you for listening to Certified Forgotten. We are the horror podcast that in our main feed talks about films with 10 or fewer reviews and Rotten Tomatoes with amazing guests. In our uncertified episodes, we talk about new releases and kind of throw down on things that at least one of us feels passionate about. That's kind of the one criteria we put in place. And if you're unfamiliar with Certified Forgotten as a whole, what we like to leave you with is that some films are certified fresh, some films are certified rotten, our films are certified forgotten. How is that for a fucking intro, my friend?
That was pretty good, considering you're in Las Vegas, have been drinking today. And you're just no, you're here, you're rocking it out, you're rocking and rolling. I love the dedication of you loving Cuckoo so much that you would take the time out of your Vegas trip to come debate me on it.
So I feel like the me being here right now is less about me, oh, I'm in Vegas and doing other stuff. It's more that like Vegas is a version of the festival energy, right? I've been up all night, I've been drinking a little bit, we're having a good time, and now I have to sit down and do some film criticism. So I feel like I'm sort of, faux Fantastic Fest South by Southwesting this movie in real time, which is the perfect energy I want to bring to the studio.
And it is a very fantastic fest South by Southwest midnighty movie because I mean I saw it at South by, so I'm rocking off my experience back in March, but it just fits that vibe. Played Fantasia too. That's where it belongs.
So let's talk about Cuckoo. And actually, at the outset, I'm going to throw down a pretty significant spoiler warning here because I think we're going to talk about some of the elements of the film which really aren't revealed until the third act. A lot of this movie is intentionally and unfolds in a way that doesn't let you know what secrets it has until it's in kind of like the final stretch of the movie. So if you haven't seen Cuckoo, I strongly recommend you go check it out. Go ahead and like this podcast, like this episode, come back to it. We'll still be here when you're ready. But if you're ready to get into it, a brief reminder, a brief synopsis of what the film is about. Not much has gone right for Gretchen in the last few years. After her father remarried, Gretchen was saddled with a new sibling she doesn't like and a relocation to the German Alps that puts her far away from her friends. But family tension is only the beginning of her problems. Now a resident of the resort run by the enigmatic Herr Koenig, Gretchen soon finds herself stalked by a woman who the resort staff pretend does not exist. The newest film from Lou's director Tillman Singer, Cuckoo, is a modern twist on folk horror that is hard to embrace and even harder to forget. Donato, for our conversation today, I have not seen Lou's, and I would really like, I know you have, and I know that part of the review that you wrote for Inverse, you made a point of saying that based on these two movies, you're going to show up for anything that Tillman Singer does. So let's talk about Lose for a second. Tell me a little bit about that movie and kind of why it set the stage for you going into Cuckoo.
Yeah. So Lose is like crazy. Like I'm trying to like think of the easiest way to describe it, but number one, it's Tillman Singer's thesis film. It wasn't like he went out, got neon money, and made Lose. Like that was literally his like school project movie, and it was playing Fantasia, and it was playing all these festivals. So I was blown away when I saw it because it is so bizarre, it is so surreal, and I'm pulling up a very quick synopsis. So this is just the basic synopsis. After getting into a car crash, a taxi driver, Luz, is brought to the police station for questioning. A doctor attempts to hypnotize her and get the information about the night. However, the doctor is possessed by an ancient demon that Luz summoned during her stay at a religious school back in her youth. And so what we watch, what the movie is Luz in custody in a police station, and it just becomes almost like one giant dream. Like the scene that sticks out to me is as the demon is starting to work its magic, and the police station itself just turns into another whatever scenario it wants to be, a location, blah blah blah. So it's Luz pretending she's driving her taxi in the interrogation room in some room in the police station, and as she's imaginary sitting in like a desk chair and imaginary driving, all of a sudden when she presses her foot down, you hear the gas pedal. All of a sudden when she, like the wind whipping this and that. So you watch her transition from being in this again, blank police room, interrogation room, and all of a sudden she's just in the car. It's so natural, so seamless, and like it's that surrealism that Singer works with tremendously well. But where I'll tie that into Cuckoo is I like Lose a little more because it goes into the gonzo art house experimentation vibe full force, and the whole movie is just like, hey, you want plot, fuck you, it doesn't matter, like you're going for a ride, I'm going to take you there. But he does so in a way that is, for me, just incredibly like I never looked away. It's so engaging, and the way that he just throws caution to the wind and dives headfirst into the absurd elements, I guess, let's say. Like Cuckoo, to me, he tries to have a story, and unfortunately it doesn't really work for him as well. That's weird to say, like there's no structure in Lose, and that's why it fucking rules. And Cuckoo, it does get appropriately cuckoo, but I don't think he has the same control when he's trying to tell a richer, deeper story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you mentioned, kind of we'll use the word opacity, right? Like the Cuckoo in particular, having not seen Lose, but Cuckoo is a pretty opaque movie. It doesn't serve up a lot of its backstory, the lore of its characters until sort of the end, and then if you watch the film and you are on the wavelength in the first act, you're probably really going to like it because when it starts to explain what's going on, a lot of those pieces kind of come together. But I reviewed this for Certified Forgotten. We're trying to do more reviews on the site, so we have that published and on Rotten Tomatoes. Full circle moment for us. But one of the things that I wrote about in the review is the fact that like this is a perfect Neon film. Neon as a distributor tends to do stuff that is what I would describe as European influenced, right? Like 70s and 80s European horror, very opaque, like experimental, surrealistic. Use the word surreal. I think that's a really good word to use. And it avoids sort of the more conventional tropes of the horror genre. A lot of the movies that they do, they're very, very in line with Brandon Soderbergh. They've released several of his films now. And it's just, if you see that kind of like title card, the neon title card for a horror
Wait,
film,
wait, wait. Brandon Cronenberg?
did I say, what did I say? Soderbergh?
Soderbergh.
All
I
right,
was like,
Brandon Cronenberg,
no, you're
yes.
fine. I wanted to make sure I didn't miss something. That was it. You're fine.
Brandon Soderbergh, who also makes procedural police thrillers for $400,000 each. Now, Brandon Cronenberg, yes, and I think that I haven't always been on the wavelength of a lot of neon releases. Like kind of in general, because I am so interested in characters, because movies tend to live or die for me, whether I find myself connecting to the things that are happening to the characters on screen, if I find myself compelled and sympathetic towards them and the arcs that they go, like a lot of people say, you said this, I've said this, everybody says this, like horror is it barters in empathy for as much as we think that oh, it's bad things, terrible things happening. Horror is an empathy driven genre. It is the notion of we don't want these bad things to happen to these characters. So I will be honest and say I was super skeptical going into Cuckoo because I knew it was a neon film and it was a filmmaker I was unfamiliar with, and I thought it was going to be weird for the sake of weird. And I think that where you and I diverge probably a little bit is I found what I would describe as sort of a contextual grounding that helped me understand it, right? Like that folk horror element, the fact that Cuckoo is really leaning into the idea of like Irish changelings, right? In Irish mythology, there's this notion that you didn't leave your baby unattended in their crib because, the fairies would come and replace it with one of their own, and you would raise this look-alike that you thought was your child, but wasn't actually your child. It was this creature. This changeling mythos, appears a lot in European folklore, and for as much as the trappings of this are doing a lot of different things, that to me became kind of the through line at the end of the movie where I was like, I understand the foundation that this is built on, or at least I have a way of interpreting the foundation that this is built on that works for me. And it's impressive to me how often you basically being like, I have a read or I have an angle on a movie can lock an entire thing in, right? How many times have we watched a movie where like I can't figure out my read on it, and so I'm just bouncing or skating along the outside of it? For me, I found that with Cuckoo, and I think that kind of like softened some of the rougher edges that you had with regards to how it's going about its storytelling.
Yeah, and, like, I agree it's doing exactly what you're saying, and it's that funny talking about what locks you in and, like, bouncing off ideas and stuff, because I think we're both on the same read, the same wavelength, but where it loses me a little more is because like, Tillman Singer loves playing in this unreality, and 2 movies in, I can definitely see that, but again, the comparison to me where Lose is all unreality, it's all, off whatever you wanna say, like, it is a crazy movie. Cuckoo is also part of a crazy movie that then tries to work in all these folkloric elements and make sense of it all. And that's where I think it loses me a little bit because that beginning stuff where it is detached, let's say, from like a normal storytelling narrative, and we get the early flourishes of like, yes, there's something not right with the women here. There's something happening here. Early vomit scene where we're seeing it all through Hunter Schafer's Gretchen. There is a bizarre scenario here, and I liken it to movies like The Cure for Wellness or Borgman, just two like stunningly weird movies that sustain that feeling the whole time.
Yeah.
It's weird to say that Cuckoo to me, having seen Lose and knowing Tillman, like is his filmmaking style, Cuckoo almost seems restrained. It feels like he's holding back at points because he wants to make something that is a bit more neon marketable, that is a bit more, all right, I did my arty thing that's pure gonzo. Let's try to like draw some audiences in. And I don't think it does the overall experience, it does it all that much service, because it feels like two movies fighting itself where you have the Celtic, a hole in the ground kind of movie, like that dreary tone, that dread. I think Dan Stevens is partly doing great things, but also again, it's not as weird as he should be in the scenario, which is weird to say out loud. But again, you have that dreary A24 hole in the ground vibe, but then you also do have the creature feature elements, the pure bliss that is just like, oh yeah, let's get wild, let's see where this goes. A lot of bird imagery in these things. So like I feel like the marriage doesn't work as well as it should. And I would have loved to see Tillman just kind of go full force again. I feel like we get the more theatrical version of Tillman Singer where I love that he is bringing his weirdness. And again, I will see any movie he makes because of these very things. But yeah, I struggle with Cuckoo. I struggle. It was South by was weird because talked about neon. Like I was also down on Immaculate. Like everyone, the great Immaculate versus the First Omen debate. Like I'm full force First Omen, not Immaculate. So I've been hit and miss with neon this year and saying filmmakers going for it. Like absolutely go for it. Do your thing. I think neon does great with that. I'm obviously talking about Long Legs. We had our combo about that too.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I just I can see the elements where I'd compare it to A Cure for Wellness. I can see the Borgman ness of it all, this or the European, just like real weirdness. And I struggle with the here in Cuckoo. I don't think it marries. I don't think it's a good merger.
Yeah, I won't argue with the fact that that this is more of a series of ideas than a cohesive like story, right? And I think that goes to the point that you're saying is that this is neither a conventional narrative with kind of beats that we can hang our hat on when it comes to character development, nor is it completely an abstract storytelling piece. It has elements of that. I think one of the things that I like the most about the movie, and again, we're in spoiler territory here, is the first time that Gretchen encounters the cuckoo. It does that thing that the becomes sort of like the power, the hypnosis, whatever you want to call it. The cuckoo, when it warbles, basically they represent that on screen, the disorientation of the characters on screen when they're under the influence of that, by fucking with the editing. They repeat scenes again and again, and scenes play with like slight differences as if they use different takes for the sequence. Although they're mostly the same, there isn't like a ton of difference. It's not like the character is aware that they're kind of stuck in this little bit of a time loop. And Singer just throws that at you. There is no sort of the first couple of times it happens, it really takes until the second time that he does that for you to realize that it's intentional. There is a split second, at least when I watched it for the first time, where I was like, I saw this in 35 millimeter at the draft house. And so I was like, oh fuck, somebody messed up the print, right? Because like that's something that can happen with a 35 millimeter print. But then the more that that happens, and the more that you realize that this is Singer's way of representing sort of the hypnotic pull that these creatures have over humans. But it's stuff like that where you're just sort of thrown into the mix, and it's kind of sink or swim. But it doesn't do that. Not everything is there. And it's not entirely abstract. It's not entirely narrative driven. It's sort of in a middle ground, and that worked for me. And I do think that one of the reasons it worked for me, probably the biggest reason that it worked for me, is because of Hunter Schafer. She's an actress that I am not too familiar with. I never watched the HBO series, which name is escaping me for some reason right now. I haven't seen, she's only done a couple of feature films, and most of those were in smaller supporting roles or voiceover work. So I'm not super familiar with what she brings to the table as a performer. But in this movie, I think that she is the perfect vehicle for what Singer's doing, because she is providing sort of this youth and revolt energy that the movie allows her to react um, with fear to the scary moments. But there are also these moments throughout where she basically calls bullshit on what's happening around her, and it's such a refreshing turn for the character. I think everybody can remember the scene in the trailer, which is the one where Dan Stevens says, like, "Oh, you were supposed to be here," and she gestures and she's like, "That's a fucking weird thing to say." And that is the energy that that character brings to the movie. There is a lot of heavy ideas happening, and Hunter Schafer as Gretchen is the one that's sort of responsible for being like, "This fucking is weird and it sucks and I'm out." And I really think it's a credit to her as an actress, but also to the ability to create a character like that at the core of your movie. I think that if it was played a bit more conventional, if the character of Gretchen had been a little bit more of a victim or been a little bit less self-aware about what's going on in the movie, it wouldn't have worked as well as me. It works because Gretchen throughout the movie has a few moments where she's like, "This fucking sucks. What's happening here? This doesn't make any sense, and I hate it."
Yeah, and I love the way she works with Dan Stevens specifically. I mean, we're talking about Dan Stevens and all the allusions to just the when he opens his mouth first and just says Guten Tag, like it's such a good encapsulation of the caricature Tillman is trying to present with this character. And again, while I don't think it sustains the whole movie, and when Stevens does these more straightforward portrayals of villainy, like he's kind of like a subdued Bond villain in a way sometimes, but again, playing his little instrument and stuff, like there's so much good there. But Schaefer specifically, I agree, like is an anchor in this movie, and whether even it's just the scene where she first gets chased by the hooded woman, and it's like the first real scary scene of the movie, and like it's one of the highlights for me. 100%, you're gonna get me every time, where the headphones are on someone riding their bike, and all like you're seeing the front version of it, so they can't turn around and see what's behind them. They're hearing the music. It's great. The great score throughout the whole movie too, so it's audibly pleasing. But then you just see the silence when the camera cuts to like a wider view and you don't hear what she's seeing anymore. And it's just that isolation sound, which is a lot of nothing, but like the feet start, you start hearing the feet and you start hearing the pursuer. That's such a good scene. And that is where I think like Tillman, it does Ace's work in Cuckoo. Like there are some good horror imagery here. There's some creepy stuff, but just the way that Schaefer is also able to like that the what you just said about youth and revolt, I love that. Like that is exactly what she's doing here, and that's the perfect way to encapsulate it. Um, but even the way that Schaefer is like riding the bike as this scene is going on, and the way that the character is emanating this unawareness, and like it just builds more of the scene where it's someone could ride a bike. That's easy. We all know how to ride a bike, and you can easily perform that. But I don't know, like the way Schaefer does it just brings more personality into it, and it just really accentuates the fact that this character has no idea what's going on, and this pursuer is right behind them at a certain point. The tension there is so good, and then it dissipates again because we get more of like the character interactions, and we get more of the interrogation scenes and stuff like that. So like I it needed more consistency somewhere because it's bouncing around what you said about it being like, kind of a clip show. Like in my review, I called it a highlight reel. Like it cuts such a good trailer. It would be such a good 10-minute highlight reel. Like there is so much talent here. Once again, while I will always be here for a Tillman movie, but even the performances kind of let me down at some places because I feel like they waver, like they're not consistent, and again, that is the overall complaint I guess I have with Cuckoo. But I mean, like it is an A plus cast. Like you go up and down it, and it's doing great stuff. So it's weird. Like I just keep saying weird, and I know that's probably repeating myself, but like this is a movie I should love. Like we know we talk about movies all the time, and I feel like if you listen to this podcast, you know what I'm in for. I want that. I want that weird shit.
I would describe this one maybe as muted maximalism, which means that it's like perfectly in line with my tastes as a horror fan, and sometimes in line with yours. Not always, though. It's that balance act a little bit. You're talking about Singer's visual ideas. I want to highlight one scene in particular because it wasn't something I'd seen in a horror movie before, and it stuck with me. And it's the scene I keep going back to in my mind. There's a scene about halfway through the movie where Gretchen gets in a car accident, and there's a lot of ways you can shoot a car accident, right? There's a lot of ways that you can show the aftermath of that, and the impact on the characters and all of that. And what Singer does is he keeps the camera in close up on Hunter Schafer, and we watch as basically pool of blood, like blood runs along the side of her face and starts to pool in her eye to the point where her eye starts to turn red. Like the it's like if you have a scratch in your eye or red eye or something, like the white of her eye turns red as like all of this blood is pooling in her, and she can't move. And it's such a small visual idea, but to me it's just kind of like it's another one of those wavelength moments, right, where like all of these little things that I really 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 enjoy about the world that Singer's built and the way he's representing this strung together in such a way that I didn't need there to be. I sometimes you are we have this conversation a lot, right? Like sometimes um a whole is the sum of its parts. Sometimes a whole is more than the sum of its parts. And I think that this is one of those movies where every element of it worked so much for me individually that I provided the necessary enthusiasm to start to fill in some of those places where, to your point, like the story may like ebb and flow a little bit with regards to big ideas, big scenes and stuff. I was just so on board with the pieces of this movie that I put them together. Like I glued them together in my mind, and that made Cuckoo something that I really liked.
Yeah, I'm like reading my review back in little chunks as we're talking about it because like that is I'm just like refreshing certain aspects, and I wrote a line that I actually kind of really like, but basically equating the sense that like the story itself and the disturbing imagery that Tillman is able to create are like playing bumper cars, and like they're trying to like vie kind of like there's no harmony there. They're bouncing off one another, and there's no fluidity. So I I think that's my biggest thing, and I think that's my biggest struggle. Um, and it's just a disappointing struggle because like you can love a filmmaker so much and you want to show up for them all the time. And again, two movies in, I think this is a tremendous between Lose and Cuckoo. Like there is so much positive brightness here for the future for Tillman, and especially like if he gets more money and stuff like that. I can only imagine what he does. But I guess like I keep thinking about a cure for wellness, which might be like that weird comparison, but the way that that works for me is once again because we feel this surrounding just gloom in a way, or at least I do. Like I know that is also a divisive as fuck movie, so like that is probably a weird comparison to make. God, I guess I'm saying weird.
No, a cure for wellness is perfect. You and I are
Yeah,
both on the like. I know that the ending isn't great, but like that
yeah.
movie is perfect.
Right. So like the comparison there is like I never got out of that movie. Once I sipped the Kool-Aid, whatever you want to say, like I went on that dive. I was plunged into whatever the hell was going on. But where that movie succeeds for me at least and how it keeps me engaged is because it keeps sinking deeper. It keeps sinking deeper and deeper and deeper. And like Verbinski is very good at doing that. Where for Tillman, I felt like it was up and down, up and down. Like I'd sink down, but then all of a sudden float back to the top when let's say there are lulls. And that is the experience that I walked away from Cuckoo on. And I know like I'm also not in the majority there. Like I'm in the minority. It's got a solid like 75% on Rotten Tomatoes. So people are digging it. And I love that too. Like I want this guy to have all the opportunities in the world.
Yeah, there's nothing. The worst thing in being a film critic, the worst thing about loving movies is when you watch a movie that is neither good nor bad, it just exists. But I think the second worst thing about being a film critic is when you like a movie that you really wanted to love and it just misses out on that next gear for you, like that something that you thought was going to be like an inner circle Hall of Famer of the year type thing, and it just like it never gets over that hump into something that you truly love. And so people are like, "Did you like it?" And you have to be like, "Yeah, I mean, yeah, I really like. I liked it. I thought it was good." And then you have to like be like, "But," and talk through the problems that you had with it while still being like, "But you should definitely see it because I really liked it." Right? That's always kind of a frustrating thing for me. Um, Donald, I want to ask you before we wrap about the end of the movie, though, because I you talk a lot about sort of the the build, right? The escalation of events, and momentum is a word that comes to mind when you talk about this movie. Maintaining a singular momentum, a singular thread of momentum that allows it to like keep escalating in a way that A Cure for Wellness does. I want to know if you feel like it got there in the end, because there is that what I think is a really fun shootout, right? A thing you don't really expect to happen in a movie like this, where suddenly two characters are basically, in a standoff with Gretchen and her sister kind of caught in the middle. Did that give you the payoff that you were looking for?
No, it didn't, and I took that pause because that is, I think that's where actually the movie lost me. And by lost, I mean I still appreciate it. I appreciate what it's trying to do, but that's where I went from. All right, you had me at like a 3 out of 5, and now I go down to that 2.5. It didn't pay off in the ways I wanted it to. It became once again like a different movie with the shootout, and I also think the shootout is not very excitingly done. There's good chase elements. Do not get me wrong. Like I think there's some shelves that get knocked over. There's a lot of good tension when the hooded woman is involved, but the shootout itself, I kind of thought it was a boring way to take. It did not. So that is my simple answer. It was just one more swerve that I don't think this movie needed because we had enough to go on at that point. Like you said, the story is very backloaded. We do get the introduction of all these folkloric elements and explanations, but to kind of go out guns blazing, it once again didn't feel like the rest of the movie. It felt like another clip that at the time was cool. Like, yeah, sure, let's give them guns, let's have that fun shootout. But I just don't think it just fits with the rest of the movie. So that's my answer. No, I that was one of my problems. That was one of my big walkaways. Nah.
I respect that. I will say, in defense of the shootout at the end, my favorite. A huge fan of gun violence in movies. Increasingly, as I get older, less interested in gun violence in movies. Not in any kind of like a moral way. I'm just like, A, there's not a lot to do, and sort of B, I'm like, whatever. But my favorite, I think my favorite gunfight in a film, and I know that Taylor Sheridan is not everybody's favorite filmmaker, but the gunfight in Wind River, where a group of characters are basically about to shoot at each other and then do, and it all unfolds in like 3 minutes of build up and then 5 seconds of shooting. There was that kind of energy to the gunfight in Cuckoo, where it's about the anticipation, sort of the standoff and the prisoner's dilemma of like, if I shoot, you're definitely going to shoot, and if you shoot, then I'm definitely going to shoot, and we're all going to end up dead. There's a fatalism to that that I think really worked for me in Cuckoo. Um, but you know what? Hey, if you're listening to this and you're like Cuckoo ends in a gunfight, then it's probably you're definitely going to go into the movie, probably, if not, I hope not spoiled necessarily, but at least sort of like grounded in all the many, many, many things this movie is doing. Because if you have not seen it, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it yet, the movie that Donato and I just described is probably impenetrable. And that to me is part of the fun. It's doing like four different things. It does it really well if you listen to me. It does it not so well if you listen to Donato. I think this is clearly a Monagle movie in our sort of like end game question of Monagle or Donato movie. But I'll tell you what, if no matter whether you end up liking it or not liking it, there's probably 30 minutes in this movie, somewhere in the middle, beginning, middle, or end, that you're going to really, really enjoy. Is that a fair place of agreement?
Yeah, I have no qualms with that take on it because I do enjoy parts of it. I just wish I enjoyed the whole thing.
All right, there you go. Cuckoo in theaters now. Be sure to check it out. Some theaters. I don't know how many theaters. You got to have good movie theaters next to you to have Cuckoo, but hopefully it's playing in a theater near you. Donato, if people want to read your review of Cuckoo, follow you on social media, see what you're up to, what's the best way to connect with you online?
You can follow me at Donato Bomb on Twitter, Letterboxd, and Instagram. Also, Blue Sky and TikTok, a little less, but still there. You can read such reviews as my inverse review of Cuckoo, or my IGN review of Borderlands, or my Collider review of Duchess. That was just this week. So I will always have content coming out. I'm always writing. Follow along, and I'll tell you what.
Yeah, Donato is not as active on Blue Sky as he should be. Otherwise, he would have texted me to tell me, reacted to the review or the post that I wrote about seeing Kill. I watched Kill and I really liked it, and I posted about it, and you never commented on it, and that lets me know you didn't see it. So we're gonna have that conversation a little bit later. But as for myself, you can follow me on Blue Sky, Monogle at the Blue Sky stuff. Follow Certified Forgotten on your podcast platform of choice, and be sure to visit our website, www.certifiedforgotten.com, where we publish some of the. We're biased, we're super biased, but where we publish some of the best film criticism on independent and underseen horror in the business. We appreciate your support, your likes, your shares. Sign up for our Patreon at patreon.com/certified forgotten and support us. And we'll keep telling you the movies that we disagree on, but odds are half of you will really love. Goodbye, friends.